In 1718, a young lieutenant in the Royal Navy named Lionel Woodruff chased a French ship across the Caribbean. The chase took him to the Bahamas, where he soon realized the French had outmaneuvered him. But something else caught his eye. Scattered along the shoreline were some 200 British soldiers who had recently landed in the area. Now he thought about the reports of pirates preying on British ships, and the behavior of these land-loving soldiers gave him a strong suspicion. He approached them and asked why they had left their post, expecting mutiny, but their answer surprised him. They said they had come ashore to bury treasure they had stolen from a captured ship. When Woodruff noticed that they were wearing the same clothes as the sailors on the missing ship, he understood exactly what had happened. He had stumbled upon the site of an act so audacious that it shocked even his jaded naval mind. A full-blown pirate mutiny, and what's more, the mutineers had gotten away with it. But Woodruff wasn't going to let them get away with it, because what he was looking at was not just a scene of theft, but a scene of history. What he was looking at was gold. But how true is the story of the Bahamas burial? Is there any truth to the idea that somewhere beneath the sands of an island or hidden in the hollow of a tree lies a forgotten fortune? Or is it all just fantasy? There is evidence that when Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, died in battle with British naval forces off the coast of North Carolina in 1718, he had amassed a personal fortune of around £400,000 sterling. However, historians do not agree whether any of this treasure was ever buried. While Blackbeard was rumored to have stashed loot on several islands, including Oak Island in Nova Scotia, no significant amount of treasure has ever been discovered, leading many to speculate that the tales of buried booty are just that, tales. Some historians argue that the idea of Blackbeard burying treasure is likely a concoction designed to lure treasure hunters like Woodruff to the Bahamas in search of riches that never existed. And yet, the belief in Blackbeard's buried treasure persists, spawning countless books, TV shows, and movies. But Blackbeard wasn't the only pirate to capture the popular imagination when it came to buried treasure. The legendary pirate Captain Kidd is said to have buried treasure on the island of Mingo, now known as Manhattan. Despite extensive searches, nothing has been found, leading many to conclude that the story is pure fiction. Nevertheless, people continue to scour the beaches of Manhattan in hopes of stumbling upon Kidd's lost fortune. The allure of finding buried treasure has proven irresistible to many over the years, but is there any basis in reality to these captivating tales? Let's turn to another ship, the HMS Duke, which in 1697 sailed to the West Indies laden with treasure from Panama. But before reaching their destination, the ship was captured by pirates. One of the Duke's officers, Lieutenant Cook, recounted the harrowing tale of their captivity in a letter to a friend. According to Cook, the pirates forced the crew to walk the plank if they refused to help them unload the treasure. Those who survived the ordeal were left on an island near Cuba, where they had to fend for themselves. If the story is true, it provides a grim reminder of the brutality of life in the Golden Age of Piracy, when ships like the Duke were targeted for their valuable cargo and the lives of their crew were deemed expendable. So was there really buried treasure on the pirate ships? Well, possibly. Most of the treasure that was on board ships during the Golden Age of Piracy belonged to the ship's owners. When pirates plundered a merchant vessel, they typically stole the cargo and valuables on board, which often included gold, silver, spices, and other valuable commodities. However, pirates rarely buried the treasure they stole. Instead, they typically sold it on the black market, or used it to purchase supplies, weapons, and other necessities for their own vessels. Moreover, pirates preferred to transport their plunder on their ships rather than burying it. This allowed them to sell the goods quickly upon returning to port and avoid the risk of losing their loot to the elements or other pirates. Additionally, pirates were often short on time. They had to move quickly to avoid detection by naval authorities and had little patience for tasks such as digging holes and concealing treasure. Therefore, it makes little logistical sense for them to have engaged in such activities. Finally, pirates were motivated primarily by profit. Burying treasure would have reduced its value and made it difficult to sell, which would have been contrary to their goal of maximizing their earnings. However, there are some exceptions to this general rule. Some pirates, such as Blackbeard and Captain Kidd, were known to have buried treasure on occasion. These instances were likely driven by specific circumstances, such as the presence of law enforcement or the need to hide treasure for safekeeping. Therefore, while it is possible that some pirates buried treasure, it was not a common practice and should not be seen as representative of their overall behavior. In conclusion, the idea of pirates burying treasure is largely a product of popular imagination rather than historical fact. Pirates were motivated by profit and efficiency and typically preferred to transport their plunder on their ships or sell it on the black market. Burying treasure would have reduced its value and made it difficult to sell, which would have been contrary to their goal of maximizing their earnings. While there may have been some exceptions to this general rule, the idea of pirates as wealthy treasure holders is largely a myth. Now, let's turn to another kind of ship, the Royal Navy ships, which were purpose-built for war and exploration. Their construction was a reflection of their role, robust and unwavering. They were crafted to withstand the fury of the seas and the assaults of enemy vessels. Imagine walking onto a warship from the late 17th century, and the first thing you would notice is the sheer size of the vessel. The dimensions of these ships were imposing, measuring up to 200 feet in length and 50 feet in breadth. Their hulls were constructed from sturdy oak timber, reinforced with metal reinforcements to resist the battering of cannons and the gnawing of marine worms. You would see the crew bustling about the deck, a well-oiled machine of sailors and soldiers. Discipline was the cornerstone of life aboard a warship. The crew members were bound by a strict code of conduct and subject to harsh punishments if they failed to follow orders. The officers, in turn, were expected to maintain order and enforce the rules. You would hear the sharp commands of the officers echoing across the deck as they directed the crew in their tasks. The routine aboard a warship was regimented and unforgiving. Crew members were required to perform a variety of duties, including swabbing the decks, tending to the sails, and preparing meals. They also had to endure long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of intense activity, such as during battle. Life aboard a warship was fraught with danger. The threat of disease was ever present, as was the risk of injury or death from cannon fire or battle. The conditions on board were cramped and unsanitary, and the crew members were forced to live in close quarters with little privacy or comfort. Despite the hardships, the crew of a warship were a tight-knit community, bound together by a sense of duty and camaraderie. They shared in the dangers and the triumphs of their voyages, forging bonds that lasted a lifetime. In the midst of the chaos and danger, there was a sense of order and purpose that sustained them. As you stand on the deck of a Royal Navy warship, you feel the wind whipping through your hair and the spray of the ocean on your face. The vastness of the sea all around you is a reminder of the power and mystery of the natural world. But the beauty of the setting is tempered by the knowledge that this is a place of danger and sacrifice. The men who served on these ships were brave and disciplined, and their service was a testament to the human spirit of exploration and conquest. Evastia mateys, and welcome to another swashbuckling adventure on our pirate ship. Today's escapade is going to take us to the very edge of the map. We're not just any old salty dogs today. No siree. Today we are stand-ins for the legends of old, the infamous pirates of the Golden Age of Piracy, specifically one of the most recognizable faces of the whole operation. That's right, today we be sailing in the shoes of Blackbeard himself. So get ready to walk the plank, dig up some buried treasure, and sing some shanties, because it's time to find out what being a pirate was really like. So here we be on the open seas once again. The familiar creak and sway of the ship beneath us, and the smell of salt spray and sweat in the air. Now normally, we be just one of the many hands on deck, swabbing the poop deck and climbing the rigging under the watchful eye of the first mate. But today's different. Today, we're in charge. Today, we be captain of our very own ship and crew, sailing the high seas in search of fortune and glory. Well, maybe just fortune. Oh, and there she blows on the horizon, a plump galleon laden with riches beyond your wildest dreams. Her fat hull straining under the weight of the riches she carries, sugar, spices and enslaved people from far-off lands, all ripe for the taking. Our hearts race with anticipation and our hands grip the weapons at our sides. It's time to board, me hearties. But wait, before we dive into the heart of the action, let's take a moment to explore what life was really like for these legendary figures. See, being a pirate wasn't all about wearing an eye patch and saying "R." It was a dangerous, unpredictable, and often brutal way of life. Pirates operated outside the law, preying on the riches of merchants and occasionally even entire nations. They lived by their own codes, often democratic and surprisingly fair, and followed a social structure that was as complex as any medieval guild. These weren't just mindless marauders, they were survivors, strategists, and surprisingly sophisticated businessmen. They had crews, they had ships, and they had captains. They were independent contractors working outside the rules of the civilized world, much like a freelancer who operates outside the constraints of a traditional job. They chose their own hours, set their own rates, and followed their own rules. And sometimes those rules meant dressing like this. In Blackbeard's case, Edward Teach, the man under the legend, was a former privateer, a sort of pirate sanctioned by the government to attack enemy ships. This made his transition to full-fledged buccaneer a relatively easy one. When he turned to the darker side of the law, he commanded respect and commanded fear. And if you've played Assassin's Creed, you already know that means dressing in ways that oozes both. Usually it was nothing too fancy, just a simple black shirt and trousers topped off with a tricorn hat. But that doesn't mean you can't spice things up a little. Why not add a touch of color to your ensemble? A red sash around your waist or a blue bandana covering your head. If you're feeling bold, how about a purple eye patch to really make a statement? Just remember, it's all about balance. You don't want to look too flashy and attract unwanted attention, but a little flair can go a long way in establishing your personal brand. Let's not forget the small details either. A silver ring in your ear or a necklace made of beads and leather can elevate your look without drawing too much attention. And don't forget the boots. A good pair of leather boots is a pirate essential. Now let's talk about grooming, because pirates were known for their unruly beards and unkempt hair, and for good reason. Facial hair was not just a fashion statement, it was practical. Beards protected their faces from the elements and kept them warm in the chilly ocean air. Long hair was also functional, keeping the sun out of their eyes and allowing them to be tied up to prevent it from blowing in their faces while working on deck. But it wasn't just about practicality, it was also about making an impression. A well-groomed beard and hair showed that a pirate took pride in their appearance and was willing to put in the effort to look their best. Now, it wasn't all about quantity. The quality of a pirate's facial hair and locks mattered just as much. A thick, lustrous beard was a sign of virility and strength, while well-maintained hair showed discipline and attention to detail. Sure, you might have to spend a few extra minutes in front of the mirror, but the benefits were worth it. Not only did it help establish your street cred, it also helped protect your face from the elements and keep your hair out of your face while you were busy pillaging. So next time you're looking to revamp your style, consider taking a cue from the pirates. You might just find that a little bit of facial hair and long hair can go a long way, and we're aboard. The air crackles with anticipation as we inch closer to the unsuspecting merchant ship. The crew, a motley but loyal bunch of rogues and adventurers, scrambles into position. It's showtime. With a sudden burst of speed, we close in on the merchant ship, launching our attack with the force of a crashing wave. Cannons roar and cutlasses flash as we board the merchant ship. The fight is fierce, but our superior numbers and the element of surprise give us the edge. One by one, the merchants fall, surrendering their precious cargo. But our true prize is the captain himself. Rumor has it he's got a treasure map hidden on his person. With him secured, we turn our attention to the hold, where untold riches await. Gold, jewels and silks, all the spoils of honest trade, and as the sun sets, we raise a toast to our victory, our pockets heavy with loot and our spirits high. But the night is young, and the tavern's calling. We leave the ship behind and hit the shore, eager to lose ourselves in the warm glow of its inviting lights. Being a pirate captain was a serious business. Managing a crew, planning attacks, and staying one step ahead of the law required a certain level of competence and charisma. Blackbeard possessed these qualities in spades. He was a skilled navigator and knew the Caribbean waters like the back of his hand. He also understood the importance of image and cultivated an air of mystery and menace around his person. But being a good pirate captain wasn't just about navigating the seas and managing a crew. It was also about adapting to changing circumstances and making tough decisions on the fly. Blackbeard was known for his ability to turn the tables on his enemies, using his wits and charm to outmaneuver those who thought they had him trapped. He was also not afraid to walk the plank when necessary, metaphorically speaking, of course. But with great power comes great responsibility. The life of a pirate was a dangerous one, and the captain was always at risk of losing his head, or rather, his ship. The constant threat of attack, betrayal, and mutiny required a level of paranoia and cunning that could be exhausting. Blackbeard was never truly able to relax, always on the lookout for the next challenge or the next threat. It was a lonely existence, but one that he wouldn't trade for the world. For what is life without a little bit of risk? The tavern bustles with activity. Weary sailors, merchants, and adventurers rub shoulders with locals, sharing tales of adventure and heartbreak over mugs of grog. Music spills out from a corner table, and laughter echoes through the room. It's a melting pot of cultures and personalities, a microcosm of the world. We navigate the crowded room with ease, our eyes scanning for potential allies or marks. Every face is a story, every voice a mystery waiting to be unraveled. And as the night deepens, we find ourselves drawn into a game of cards with a pair of seasoned sailors, their faces etched with the stories of 1,000 voyages. The stakes are high, the drinks are flowing, and the laughter is infectious. But beneath the merriment, there's a glint of steel in their eyes, a hint of danger lurking just below the surface. We play on, our wits and our wallets on the line, knowing that in this game, the only rule is survival. Well, me buccos, that be a taste of what it was like to be a pirate, specifically one of the most feared pirates of them all, Blackbeard. We hope ye enjoyed reliving his swaggering treasure hunting adventures. If you did, why not drop us a like and subscribe for more swashbuckling fun? Until next time, happy sailing. When you think of pirates, images might pop into your head. A salty, weathered face, a parrot on the shoulder, a sword held high. One particular image, however, stands out as iconic, a map leading to buried treasure. The idea of these infamous seafarers stashing their loot, then marking its location on a piece of parchment to be discovered another day, has captured the human imagination for ages. Movies, books, and games have fed our obsession with finding pirate booty. But how much truth is there to the legend? What do we really know about how pirates handled their plunder? And what can it tell us about the world they lived in? In truth, most pirates didn't worry about where they stashed their money, spending their ill-gotten gains as fast as they got it. Let's start with the basics. Most of the stuff pirates stole wasn't even all that valuable. When we think of pirates today, we picture them hoarding chests of gold doubloons and jewels. However, the reality was far more mundane. The main target of most pirates was cargo ships carrying everyday necessities and luxury items from one port to another. Typical targets included merchant ships full of textiles, barrels of sugar, bottles of wine, and bales of cotton. Sometimes they'd find bigger game, like a Chinese junk ship laden with silk, porcelain, and spices. Other times, they'd intercept a galleon loaded with silver from the New World or African slaves. But regardless of what was being shipped, only a small fraction of the cargo was actually precious metals. For the vast majority of pirates, their plunder was worth far more as trade goods than as bullion. With a bit of bartering skill, a pirate captain could turn a haul of cheap fabric into a fortune in rum and tobacco. Or a clever pirate could turn the tables by kidnapping a ship's crew and holding them for ransom. Of course, there were exceptions. Notorious pirates like Henry Morgan and Bartholomew Roberts amassed fortunes worth millions in today's money. But even these buccaneers mostly spent their days running ports and gambling halls, not burying treasure. So why does the idea of pirates hiding their loot persist? Part of the answer can be found in history's obsession with pirates. Throughout the Golden Age of Piracy, from the 1650s to the 1730s, newspapers, broadsides and pamphlets published lurid tales of daring raids and sad sacks of riches. While these accounts made famous the likes of Blackbeard and Morgan, they also invented legends. Since accurate records of most pirates' activities were extremely rare, writers took a fair bit of poetic license. These stories had a potent mix of realism and invention, but over time, fact and fiction became nearly impossible to sort out. And so, the notion of the hidden treasure grew, strengthened by each retelling, and the stereotype of pirates as obsessive hoarders didn't help matters. Despite the fact that most of their stolen goods weren't worth very much, pirates were stereotyped as being motivated purely by greed. Pirates were seen as people willing to do anything for money, even killing their fellow human beings. Thus, it seemed perfectly natural that they would want to hold on to their hard-earned cash, squirreling it away for a rainy day. Naturally, the best place for such treasures would be buried, hidden away, and protected from thieving pirates or greedy merchants. The perfect hiding spot would be on a remote island, preferably one without any people, since nobody would go there. There, the treasure could wait for the pirate to return, with a proper way to move it, whether a ship or a large enough crew to carry it off. Of course, this left one major question unanswered. Where exactly was this treasure? The answer is usually given in another stereotypical trope, a map. This is the most famous piece of pirate lore, tied closely to the legend of Captain William Kidd. As one of the most notorious pirates of his age, he had to have stashed away untold riches, right? Well, the answer is maybe. As a privateer, that is a legally sanctioned pirate, Kidd sailed under letters of marque issued by the English King Charles II. His mission was to raid Spanish shipping lanes and disrupt trade in the West Indies. Over the course of several voyages, Kidd and his crew attacked countless ships, seizing both cargo and treasure. Unlike most pirates, who spent their loot on drink and debauchery, Kidd saw himself as a gentleman pirate and wanted to use his ill-gotten gains to make himself rich. He purchased estates in New York and East Ham, England, bought fancy clothes and fine furniture, and even went on a personal shopping spree in London. It's safe to say that if he did bury any treasure, he wanted to keep it safe until he could figure out how to spend it. But here's the problem. We don't know if any of that treasure actually exists. After his pirating days were through, Kidd was arrested and put on trial for piracy. Given his status as a gentleman, he expected a fair trial and was sure his influential friends would ensure his freedom. Unfortunately for him, the judge presiding over his case wanted to make an example of the infamous pirate. Despite the lack of evidence, Kidd was convicted and sentenced to death. He was hanged in 1701, supposedly muttering prayers until the end. Later reports said that his head was cut off and hung from the bowsprit of the ship that had captured him as a warning to other would-be pirates. His body was then dismembered and the parts displayed around London Bridge. Now, some reports claim that before his capture, Kidd gave maps to his buried treasure to his wife and friends, but none of them were ever recovered. Others claim that after his execution, treasure hunters scoured the areas where he was believed to have buried his loot, but little, if anything, was ever found. The most likely reason is that Kidd didn't bury any treasure at all. A man obsessed with flaunting his wealth, it makes little sense that he'd hide his fortune rather than use it to build mansions and buy fancy toys. The reality was probably that as he spent his fortune on land and luxuries, he simply ran out of money, and that's where the legend began. Stories spread that Kidd had buried immense treasure along the shores of Long Island or in the Caribbean islands, prompting generations of searchers to come looking for the fortune. The trouble is, they were usually too late. The coastline had been settled long ago, and farmers and fishermen had ploughed up any possible hiding spots. Besides, when people heard the stories, they knew how the tale went. The treasure was buried on an island, on a lonely beach, under a palm tree, or next to a skull. By the time someone got around to digging for the treasure, there was nothing left but sand. Despite the lack of success, the legend lived on and inspired fictional tales of buried pirate treasure. Writers like Robert Louis Stevenson wove stories of treasure maps, of cryptic clues, and of lonely islands where the dead guarded their gold. Fact and fiction intertwined until it was difficult to tell them apart, and the idea of pirates burying their treasure became deeply ingrained in the public consciousness. In recent years, archaeologists and explorers have sometimes uncovered bits and pieces that kept the mystery alive. Coins have been discovered on beaches, washed ashore from wrecked ships. In the waters of the Caribbean and along the American coast, divers have brought up cannons, fragments of wooden hulls, and the remains of vessels lost to storms. These finds whisper of what might have been carried cargoes of silver from Spanish galleons or goods meant for markets across the ocean. But treasure, in truth, was not always gold or silver. For pirates, it could be barrels of rum, crates of cloth, or simple food supplies. What mattered was survival. The sparkling chest of coins was more often a dream told by those who never set foot on the deck of a pirate ship. Still, the mystery lingered because it's comforting. The thought that somewhere just beyond reach lies a hidden fortune is a story humanity has carried for centuries. The search itself becomes a kind of treasure, a symbol of hope, of adventure, and of longing. So as you drift with this thought, imagine once again the deserted beach, the gulls circling slowly above, and the tide washing away footprints in the sand. The treasure may not be real, but the mystery itself is enduring, and in that sense, perhaps the story is the treasure. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. All the best and see you next time.